Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed something in your house that wasn't there before? A door, a window, a hallway. Something that feels off, wrong, impossible. What would you do if you found a door in your home that you know wasn't there before? Nathan didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in the supernatural, but he did believe in logic. That's why, when he found a door in his house that shouldn't exist, he told himself there had to be an explanation. He was wrong. Nathan had lived in his apartment for 5 years. It was small but comfortable. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room. Nothing fancy, but it was home. He knew every inch of it. That's why, when he came home late one night and found a door in his hallway that had never been there before, his stomach twisted into a knot. It was just there, between his bathroom and bedroom, as if it had always been part of the apartment. A plain wooden door, painted white with a brass handle. His breath caught in his throat. He pressed his palm against the wood. Solid. Real. His fingers trembled as he tried the handle. Locked. He searched his apartment, looking for signs that something had been changed, but there was nothing. No construction work, no signs of remodeling, nothing to explain why this door was here. He even checked the floor plan of his apartment online. There was no room behind that wall, just empty space. His mind raced with explanations. Was he dreaming? Had he been so tired that he had just never noticed it before? No, that was impossible. He would have noticed. As the hours passed, his unease deepened. He tried to ignore the door, to go about his night, as if it weren't there. But when he went to bed, something woke him up. A soft, rhythmic tapping, coming from the other side of the door. Nathan sat up, his pulse hammering in his ears. His apartment was dark, but his eyes were locked on the door in the hallway. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was light, deliberate, like someone tapping a single fingernail against the wood. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to move. He stepped out of bed, his bare feet cold against the floor, and crept toward the door. The tapping stopped the moment he got close. He pressed his ear against the wood. Silence. His breath came out in shaky gasps. Then, just as he started to turn away, the doorknob rattled. Nathan stumbled backward, heart racing. Something was on the other side. Something that shouldn't be there. He rushed to his front door, ready to leave, but a deep, nagging fear held him back. If he left, what if the door was gone when he returned? What if whatever was on the other side got out? He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his living room, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. By the time the sun rose, he convinced himself it had been a trick of the mind, exhaustion playing with his senses. Then he saw the scratches. Thin, deep claw marks had been carved into the wood around the doorknob, as if something had tried to force its way out. The second night, Nathan spent the entire day trying to ignore the door, but no matter what he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Every time he looked away, he felt something watching him. Every shadow seemed too deep, too dark. His own reflection in the mirror looked wrong, like it was just a little too slow to move. That night, he locked himself in his bedroom. He told himself he wouldn't go near the door again. He didn't want to know what was on the other side. Then, at 3 a.m., his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Let me out." His hands shook as he stared at the screen. His breathing turned shallow. It knew he was there. He didn't reply. He turned his phone off. He squeezed his eyes shut, burying himself under the covers like a terrified child. But then, knock, knock, knock. Louder this time, faster. Nathan held his breath, frozen in fear. Then came the whisper, a voice so faint, so wrong, it barely sounded human. "You already opened it once." Nathan's stomach dropped. He had never opened the door. Had he? His hands felt sweaty. His head spun. He tried to hold on to his memories, tried to remind himself that the door had always been locked. But then, in the darkness, he saw something that shattered his sanity. The door was open. Nathan couldn't breathe. His mind screamed at him that this wasn't real, that the door had been locked, that he had never opened it. And yet, there it was. The door stood slightly ajar, a thin sliver of absolute darkness, stretching beyond the frame. No light, no shapes. Just an emptiness so deep that it seemed to swallow the air. His first instinct was to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He stood frozen, heart pounding against his ribs, eyes locked on the open door. The air in his apartment had turned heavy, like the walls were closing in. And then, something moved in the darkness. A shape, a silhouette of something wrong. Nathan stumbled backward, his foot catching on the rug, sending him crashing onto the floor. His hand scrambled for his phone, for anything, but the screen was black. Dead. The entire apartment was silent, except for the sound of his own breathing, ragged and uneven. Then, the floor creaked. not from him, from inside the dark room. Nathan's fingers dug into the carpet. The shape in the darkness shifted, just enough for him to sense its presence, but not enough to see it fully. It was tall, too tall. Its head nearly brushed the top of the doorway. Then it did something that sent ice-cold terror down Nathan's spine. It stepped forward. Not all the way, just a single step. But that was enough. Nathan felt a crushing, instinctive knowledge that if it crossed the threshold, if it entered his apartment, it would not leave. His muscles finally obeyed. He scrambled to his feet, grabbed the door, and slammed it shut. For a second, everything was still. Then, thud, something hit the door from the other side. Nathan backed away, hands shaking. He grabbed a chair, shoving it under the handle. The door didn't move again, but he could feel it. Whatever was in there was still waiting. Nathan didn't sleep. He sat in the corner of his bedroom, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the door, waiting for it to move again. It didn't. But the whispers started. At first he thought they were coming from outside. A low, murmuring sound, like someone speaking too softly to understand. But as the night wore on, he realized the whispers were inside his apartment. And worse, they were saying his name. Nathan, Nathan, Nathan. Soft, gentle, almost loving. His skin crawled. He turned on every light in the apartment, but the whispers didn't stop. They didn't grow louder. They didn't change. They just continued. And then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. Another text, from the unknown number. You can't keep it closed forever. His stomach dropped. His hands trembled as he forced himself to type back. Who are you? For a moment, there was nothing. Then, the reply came. You already know. Nathan felt sick. His entire body was ice. And then, the doorknob turned. Nathan's breath hitched as the doorknob twisted slowly. The chair wedged under the handle groaned, straining against the pressure from the other side. His legs felt numb, his body locked in place as he stared, paralyzed. Click, click, click. The handle jiggled, harder this time. Something was trying to get in. Nathan's mind screamed at him to move, to do something, but then it stopped. Silence. The apartment felt too still. His heart pounded so loudly it filled the empty space around him. Then, from behind the door, came something worse than any sound. A breath. Slow, long, deliberate. It was smelling him. Nathan's stomach twisted, nausea flooding his body. His vision blurred for a second. Dark spots dancing at the edges of his sight. He staggered back, reaching for his phone with a trembling hand. His fingers fumbled across the screen, pulling up the last text. You already know. His mind raced. Who? Who was sending the messages? Who, or what, was behind the door? And then, against every ounce of reason in his body, he did something he would regret forever. He typed back, What do you want? The reply came instantly. To come home. Nathan's blood turned to ice. His fingers hovered over the screen, but before he could respond, another text appeared. You let me out once. You'll do it again. A cold memory stabbed into his mind. Something he had forgotten. Or maybe, something he had forced himself to forget. He was 10 years old. His parents were out. He was alone in the house, watching TV, when he heard it, knocking. But not from the front door, from the hallway, from a door that didn't exist. Just like now. And just like now, he had opened it. Nathan's breath came in short gasps. He didn't remember what happened after that. He didn't want to remember. But he knew somehow that this thing had been with him ever since. Watching, waiting, feeding. And now, it was done waiting.